Hello, Tom Maguire. I just want to do a review on the book Mindset Secrets for Winning: How to Bring Personal Power to Everything You Do by Mark Minervini. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly there. So in this review, I just want to tell you why I sometimes feel suspicious of this kind of book. I'm going to tell you why I like them as well, and what was my best takeaway from this book personally. First of all, I'm going to give you a quick lowdown on who Mark Minervini is before we move on. I hadn't heard of him before, but apparently he's very successful. So he's one of America's most successful stock traders, apparently. He's a former US investing champion as well. And he's the author of the international bestsellers Trade Like a Stock Market Wizard and Think and Trade Like a Champion. He's done books, his performance coaching as well. Apparently he's become legendary around the world as well. I hadn't heard of him, but fair enough. And basically this book promises to kind of calibrate you for success and help you to understand how to win at life as well. Perform at your best under pressure, and how to bring the best version of yourself to everything that you do, which sounds like the sort of book that's right up my street and certainly up the street of this channel as well. So why am I suspicious of these types of books? Well, I've read hundreds of personal development books over the last few years. I really enjoy them. I get something out of pretty much all of them in one way or another. As anyone who has read quite a lot and listened to quite a lot of personal development books will tell you, that they can kind of become addictive just in their own way. And there is a risk that you might just read or listen to a personal development book just because you enjoy that type of book, and actually you risk stopping learning anything from them and kind of developing yourself, which is kind of why we sort of pick them up to begin with, really. So you've got to stay kind of conscious of that. The reason I'm a little bit suspicious of this type of book is because sometimes you get the feeling that you've kind of seen these types of books so many times before that you wonder where else they're going to go. And I kind of think Mark Minervini, like I say, I've never heard of him before, but he's clearly very successful. I get the feeling he's someone who's been very, very successful with money, been very, very money focused, which he would probably admit to in his own words, you know, being determined to become the best stock trader and everything else. No problem with that at all. That's absolutely fine. But that tends to make me think, has this book kind of come from the heart, or has he kind of deliberately engineered it to make it as high volume selling as possible? And of course, don't get me wrong, anyone who writes a book wants to sell books. They want them to be popular. They want to make an impact. Of course they do. If I ever wrote a book, I'd love to sell loads. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's a difference for me between someone who writes a book for maybe a deeper meaning, because it's something they possibly have believed in passionately for years. Maybe they want to leave something to their kids, whatever. I don't know. I'm not saying Mark hasn't done those things, but I sometimes get that feeling of this type of book that it's very money focused, and maybe you can be very clever with money and you can be very clever finding ways to kind of focus your book in a way that's going to maximize income. You know, the sort of people it's kind of aimed at, I suppose, the sort of different cultures it's been aimed at as well, potentially. Again, nothing particularly wrong with that, but it just kind of raises my suspicions early on. Having said that, I did quite enjoy this book. I've read, like I say, hundreds of personal development books that are similar to this. This probably had nothing in it that I hadn't read somewhere else, but the way he's kind of put it together in his own words, I quite liked. I think it's motivating. I would recommend reading or listening to this type of book, even if you've read, everything in the world of personal development almost already. Carry on with these kind of books because they do remind you, they do pick you up, and they do motivate. And sometimes it's just hearing it from a different person, having a different person's experience, different person's voice as well, can really just kind of pick you up and remind you. And something you might have missed in another book, he might say that you just sort of go, okay, he's had a greater impact with me on that point than someone else potentially. So it's definitely worth a go. It's quite entertaining. It's quite an easy listen. The narration is good as well. The one thing he said that actually stood out for me, which is quite early on, was when he said, you've got to ask yourself, what aren't you willing to do when you're going after the thing you're going after, when you're going after success? It's not so much what do you have to do, it's what aren't you willing to do? And that kind of struck me and kind of, made me think, successful people, really driven people are essentially the sort of people who are willing to do pretty much anything. And that, of course, is when you get people being a bit corrupt and standing on other people and all the rest of it. I'm not saying everyone does that necessarily, but if you are that focused and keen to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, quite often that can be at any expense. So people are prepared to take silly risks sometimes. They're prepared to do immoral things sometimes. But it's interesting, isn't it, to ask yourself, what aren't you prepared to do? And actually then that gives you a bit of a sense of how much you actually want it. And it can help you think a little bit creatively as well, which I think is really interesting. So I quite like that in a way. It can be seen as a very negative thing, but I think it's a very kind of empowering question to ask yourself. So I quite appreciated that. So yeah, just to summarise quickly, I don't think it's a bad choice, this book. If you have never read any personal development before, then I think, yeah, it's quite easy. It summarises lots of different personal development books that have gone before. You'll probably get more enjoyment from reading some of the older ones that are a bit more focused, perhaps. This one's a bit more broad and generalised, but it's quite pacey, it's quite easy to listen to, it's well narrated. I would definitely recommend it if you want either if you want something to kind of get you into personal development, or you want something to remind you and just keep you motivated along the way. I think this is a good book. So thanks a lot for listening. Keep liking, subscribing, and I'll speak again soon. Cheers.